The first sign that something was about to go wrong in my family came before the sun was fully up, when my dog began barking at the back door and my phone lit up on the kitchen counter at the exact same moment. I remember it clearly because I was standing there half awake, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, thinking about a broken latch I still had to repair later that morning. My name is Daniel Hayes, and for most of my life I've made a living fixing things people ignore until they fall apart. Houses, mostly. Fences, cracked walls, sagging porches, leaking pipes when I'm in the mood to be generous. But if you do that kind of work long enough, you learn a truth nobody really wants to hear. Wood and concrete are easy. Families are where the real damage hides. My Aunt Lorraine called me at 6:12 that morning. She was 82, sharp-minded, proud, and not the kind of woman who phoned that early unless something had shifted under her feet. She didn't bother with greetings. "Daniel," she said, and the stillness in her voice told me she had already moved past pain and landed somewhere colder. "Did you know there was a celebration for Mason on Saturday?" I stared at the coffee maker. Mason was my grandson, my son Ethan's boy, finishing his first year at university. His mother, Claire, had spent weeks talking about hosting something at their place outside Cedar Glen. Large backyard, catered food, decorative lights, more money spent on appearances than on meaning. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I thought it was this weekend." Lorraine let out one dry breath. "Everyone was there except me." That sentence changed the air in my kitchen. She wasn't some distant relative people might accidentally forget. She had helped raise Ethan when his mother and I were both working double shifts. She had taught Mason old card games, sewn costumes, sat through school recitals that felt endless, and always arrived with crisp bills tucked inside birthday cards. Forgetting her was impossible. Leaving her out was not. "I called Ethan yesterday," she said. "He got quiet." Then Claire took the phone and laughed. Daniel said, "Oh, Lorraine, it already happened." Like she was telling me I'd missed a sale at a garden shop. I sat down because I understood right then that the party itself wasn't the real story. It was the cover. "Who was there?" I asked. There was a short pause. "Helen Barker from church called me Sunday evening. She said she'd had a lovely time." Then she mentioned seeing Claire spend nearly an hour inside with a woman carrying a dark leather portfolio. Said the woman looked like an attorney. That was when the shape of it started coming into view. Not all at once, but enough for my instincts to wake up. Ethan answered on the second ring when I called him, too fast for a man with nothing on his conscience. "Dad, no worms. Noise. Just caution." Why wasn't Aunt Lorraine invited to Mason's party? Silence. Then a breath. Then movement like he was stepping away from someone. "Dad, it wasn't really a family thing. Mostly Mason's friends. She lives 15 minutes away." "I know. She's 82, not contagious." More silence. Then I heard Claire speaking in the background. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized coaching when I heard it. Ethan came back sounding like a man reciting something fed to him. "We'll come see you Thursday. We'll explain everything then." "Why Thursday?" "Because we want to do this in person. Do this. Not talk. Not explain. Do." He hung up before I could answer. I called Lorraine back immediately. She listened without interrupting, then said, "I thought that might be their move. What are you not telling me?" Another pause. "I went downtown yesterday." Of course she had. "To who?" "A lawyer. A very good one." I closed my eyes. "You already knew one?" "Daniel, at my age, the only foolish thing would be not knowing one." By the time I drove to her house on Monday, she already had a file on the dining room table and a pot of tea waiting like this was any ordinary visit. Aunt Lorraine had lived on Ashford Lane for more than 50 years, in a brick house with faded shutters and a large tree older than most marriages. My uncle had left her land, investments, and a trust built slowly over time with discipline, patience, and the refusal to pretend to be richer than he was. It was the kind of money that never bragged but never disappeared either. The kind greedy people can smell before they even see it. She told me everything plainly. The attorney at the party had not been there by chance. Claire and Ethan had already met with a firm in the city. Their concern, wrapped in careful language, was that Lorraine might no longer be fully fit to manage her own affairs. Competency review, oversight, asset protection. Those were the polished phrases. The ugly truth underneath was simple. They wanted control. Maybe Ethan had convinced himself it was for everyone's benefit. Claire, I was certain, knew exactly what she was doing. Did Ethan understand all of it? I asked. Lorraine stirred her tea slowly. Not all at once, but enough that he should have stopped it. I held the cup in both hands and tried not to picture the exact moment my own son had crossed from weakness into betrayal. What did your lawyer say? I asked. Lorraine smiled, small and calm. The same smile that used to mean I was about to learn something the hard way. She said that if people want to test whether I know my own mind, Lorraine replied, then I should give them more proof than they can survive. Thursday arrived cold and gray. I saw Ethan's SUV pull into my driveway just after 2, with Claire in the passenger seat wearing stylish sunglasses despite the clouds. She always looked like she was heading to a photo shoot no one had requested. Ethan looked older than the last time I had seen him. That part hurt more than I expected. He hugged me at the door, and I could tell from the way he held on a little too long that guilt had finally found him. Claire brushed the air beside my cheek and thanked me for making the time. I led them into the kitchen and poured coffee. Nobody touched it. Ethan started first. Dad, we're worried about Aunt Lorraine. Worried enough to exclude her from her own great-grandson's celebration? Claire stepped in smoothly. Daniel, that has nothing to do with it. We're talking about a larger issue. She's older now. She's isolated. She's making serious financial decisions without guidance. Without permission, you mean? That's unfair. No, I said. What's unfair is using a young man's party as cover for a legal meeting. Claire's expression barely shifted, but something in her posture tightened. Ethan looked at her, then down. That told me more than either of them had said. I began listing details. The attorney, the private meeting, the city firm, the competency filing they were preparing. With every fact, Ethan seemed to fold in on himself. Claire tried twice to interrupt. I let her fail both times. When I was done, the room felt smaller. Lorraine knows, I said. She knew before I did. She retained counsel on Monday. She has already completed a full cognitive evaluation with a specialist. Every paper has been updated, witnessed, filed, and secured. Ethan looked up sharply. Claire went perfectly still. Updated how? She asked. That, I said, isn't your concern. It was the most honest sentence spoken in that room besides mine. Ethan broke before Claire did. Dad, I handled this badly. I believed him. That was the painful part. He wasn't built for plotting. He was built for compromise, and in the wrong marriage, compromise turns into surrender. Claire, on the other hand, remained upright and pale, still calculating whether the situation could be recovered. Could not. There's one more thing, I said. Mason doesn't know his party was used for this. Does he? Ethan closed his eyes. Claire answered too quickly. He doesn't need to be dragged into adult matters. He already was, I said. You dragged him in the second you used his day as a shield. They left 20 minutes later, arguing in tight whispers all the way down the path. I watched from the window until the SUV disappeared. Then I called Lorraine. She answered immediately. How bad? She asked. Bad enough. Good, she said, and hung up. She invited us all to Sunday dinner. Not asked. Invited. There's a difference. She also told Mason to come, which meant she had chosen the field and arranged every piece herself. I knew then that Thursday had only been the warning. Sunday would be the verdict. Her dining room looked exactly as it always had when I was a boy. Polished wood table, clean curtains, silverware placed with absolute precision. But the atmosphere in that house felt charged, like a courtroom before the judge enters. Ethan was already there when I arrived, sitting too straight, hands locked together. Claire sat beside him in a dark blouse, her face so controlled it looked painted on. Mason had no idea what was coming. He was 20, tired from classes, hungry, and talking about a professor who kept changing deadlines as if that were the greatest injustice in the world. Lorraine served roast beef, potatoes, beans, homemade rolls, and peach tea. She asked Mason about school. She complimented Claire's earrings. She asked Ethan whether work had improved. It was the most unsettling performance of normal I had ever seen. Then she folded her napkin and set it beside her plate. "Mason," she said gently, "I have something for you." She handed him a long envelope. He opened it, looked down, and stopped breathing for a moment. "Aunt Lorraine, this can't be right." "It is," she said. "Your uncle and I always believed education should open doors, not lock them with debt. That money is already in an account under your name alone. It will cover your studies and give you a fair beginning." Mason looked from her to his parents, confused and overwhelmed. Claire spoke first. "That's incredibly generous, but I really think we should all discuss." "No," Lorraine said. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "There is nothing to discuss." Then she turned back to Mason. "I also want you to know that I have reorganized the remainder of my estate. Legally, thoroughly, and with full medical confirmation of my capacity to do so." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Ethan looked sick. Claire had finally lost color. Mason stared at them both now, no longer merely confused, but alert. He knew something was wrong. Young people always know more than adults hope. Lorraine lifted her glass slightly. "I am aware," she said, "that a meeting took place at your party concerning the possibility of taking control over my affairs." Mason slowly turned toward his parents. "What?" Ethan's shoulders dropped as if something inside him had collapsed. Claire opened her mouth, but Lorraine cut in with the calm precision of a blade. "Ask them," she said. "You deserve the truth from the people who used your celebration to plan against me." What followed was not shouting. That would have been easier. It was worse. Plain facts spoken around a family table under warm light, with half-finished food still on the plates. Ethan admitted enough. Not everything, but enough. Enough for Mason to understand that his mother had pushed it and his father had failed to stop it. Enough for him to look at Claire not like a son seeking comfort, but like a young man discovering a stranger inside his own home. "You used my night for that?" he asked. He said it only once, but it landed harder than any scream. Claire tried to dress it up in words like protection, responsibility, planning, and keeping resources in the family. No one believed her anymore, not even Ethan. By evening, Ethan and Claire were gone. They left separately, which told me the marriage had taken a blow it might not survive. Mason stayed behind with Lorraine while I cleared plates and rinsed dishes at the sink. Their voices carried softly from the table. She told him not to carry guilt for other people's choices. He asked if she was really all right. She said she had survived widowhood, surgeries, a flooded basement, one terrible mayor, and 40 years of church dinners. "This," she told him, "is only bad manners dressed in expensive clothes." He laughed at that, and the laugh sounded older than it had at dinner. When I stepped outside later, the air had turned sharp and cold. Mason followed me out and stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking back at the house. "Grandpa," he said, "is Dad a bad person?" I thought about Ethan as a boy with scraped knees and a broken wrist from trying something reckless on his bicycle. I thought about the man at my kitchen table, looking at me like he hated himself for needing someone else to tell him where the line was. "No," I said, "but weak people can do real harm when they let stronger people do their thinking for them." He nodded slowly. "And Mom?" I looked at the warm light glowing through Lorraine's dining room window. "Your mother confused access with entitlement," I said. "Life usually corrects that lesson eventually." Winter came early that year. A few weeks later, Ethan showed up at my workshop alone, asking if I had time to talk. He looked stripped down, honest for once, emptied of excuses. Claire had moved out. Mason was keeping his distance. Ethan said he didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted a chance to become the kind of man who would never fold like that again. I told him change was slower than apology and much less dramatic. But yes, a man could rebuild if he was willing to stand long enough in the mess he had made. On Christmas Eve, I drove over to Lorraine's house to fix a stubborn back door and found her standing on the porch in a heavy coat, watching snow gather on the railing. She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a note in her careful handwriting. It said, "Asterisk, people think age makes a person easier to move. Sometimes it only makes them harder to fool." Asterisk, I laughed so hard my eyes watered. Then I looked at her, really looked, at the woman they had mistaken for fragile simply because she moved slowly and spoke softly. They had seen old hands and a quiet voice and assumed surrender. What they had failed to see was memory, discipline, patience, and a lifetime of learning exactly when to speak and when to wait. Families do not always survive greed unchanged. Sometimes the damage remains. Sometimes trust never grows back the same. But that winter, standing on her porch with snow falling and the repaired door swinging smoothly on its hinges, I understood something I wish I had learned much earlier. Not every victory needs shouting, and not every punishment has to look like revenge. Sometimes justice is simply an elderly woman setting the table, telling the truth, and making sure everything ends up exactly where it belongs.